Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast where a behavioral scientist examines what it's like to live a humorous life. Glimpse into the lives of the funniest people in entertainment, business, and science as your host, Dr. Peter McGraw, explores their habits, motivations, and secrets to success. Get ready to fire up your brain and your funny bone. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast that looks at the lives of funny people. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Sommer Browning. Sommer writes poems, draws comics, and tells jokes. She's the author of Everything But Sex, which is a collection of comics. Want to hear about this dream I had, which is a transcription of her dreams. And You're on My Period, which is a joke book. She works as a librarian in Denver. Sommer is also one of my favorite people on Twitter. Follow her at VagTalk, VAGTALK. Welcome, Sommer.
Thank you.
So, I'm assuming you haven't listened to this podcast, so you don't know this question's coming.
No, I knew I should have listened to them, but I looked at the descriptions of many of them.
Okay. Nothing tempting enough to click play.
Yeah, I just don't have time to listen to podcasts. I don't know when I would do it.
I get it. You're too busy creating. If you weren't working as a librarian, a writer, or an artist, what would you be doing?
Probably waiting tables. That seems to be the fourth thing I'm good at. So,
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Traveling, I love doing that. Living elsewhere.
Like Williamsburg?
Williamsburg,
Williams
in New York?
Yeah.
I did live there.
I know.
Yes, it's unrecognizable now when I go back.
It's
Basically just a T-Mobile store, next to a Whole Foods, next to a Rite Aid. Are there Rite Aids anymore?
No, it's Dwayne Reed, right?
Yeah.
Dwayne Reed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's go back to this. So you said waiting tables.
Mm-hmm.
You have waited tables.
Yes.
Tell me about that experience.
I waited tables in many different cities, many different diners. I usually tried to get graveyard shift. So I was nocturnal for a period of years.
Is that right?
Yes. That kind of ended when I worked at Grill in Tucson, which is closed now. It's a 24-hour diner. And I remember going in there and they were going to offer me a job. And I said, well, I just work graveyard shift. And they're like, we don't let girls work graveyard shift. And I was like, I was furious.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's insane. I work graveyard shift in this city, this diner. So I was training one night and I got off around 2 a.m. and some guy with a knife comes in, staggering around, comes behind the counter, and the waiter at the time just was smoothly moved him out. And, I said, you know what? I don't need to work graveyard shift, I'll be a feminist another day.
That was it. And how long ago was that?
That was 2002.
Okay. And was that your last?
That was my last restaurant gig.
Okay.
Yeah.
What'd you like about it?
I think mostly I like the camaraderie with my coworkers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're just all thrown into this really high-stress situation together, and everybody's best and worst pieces of their personality came out, and we bonded really quickly, and yeah, it was just a really nice cross-section of people.
So I'm assuming your sense of humor helped you in that business.
I think it probably did. Yeah, more so than in librarianship. Yeah.
Tell me more. Tell me more. Are you allowed to have a sense of humor as a librarian?
I don't know yet. I mean, I've done this for 10 years and I still am not quite sure.
Being a librarian is serious business.
Sometimes.
It feels serious to me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I feel like you're always operating with less staff and less money than you need. So there's a kind of desperation there. Always, again, trying to prove your worth, too. I think about if libraries were proposed now and people were like, wait a second, you can just rent the books for free? No one would go for it, So it seems like an outmoded institution when you compare it to, late capitalism. I
often lament what we call the status quo bias, which is just like, because something existed before, it ought to continue existing today. And there are plenty of things that shouldn't exist today just because they existed before.
Mm-hmm.
Like you, in your words, you wouldn't create it. Like if cars didn't exist today and we were to invent them, we would certainly not invent them in the way that they are, the way they exist.
Yeah.
That said, I love libraries. Like I joke, I think I'm right when I joke with the library staff here at my school that I'm the number one patron. Like I am constantly getting books.
Mm-hmm.
Just before I picked you up outside, I dropped off a book that I had looked at. And I just love physical books. I like the concept of a place to go to look at them, touch them, pick them up, drop them off, have people there who are experts like you in helping me answer questions, find resources and so on. So
yeah.
So thank you for your service.
Oh, yes, of course. I love them too for all of those reasons you said.
Yeah, I just think that businesses have what's called a loss leader.
Oh.
And it's a product that loses money, but is seen as an essential part of the business for a variety of reasons. To me, it's fine if you want to have a smart, educated society, you need to have libraries.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, should they? Of course, they should change and adapt and improve because of technology. But I just don't think that.
I think that we've done a great job at doing that too. I think everyone's out. I was in a Lyft the other day and they're like, boy, how do you keep up with the technology these past 10 years? And I was like, we've been doing this since the beginning, Media has changed so much. Mm-hmm. And, now most of what we buy is electronic and we're buying kind of the cutting edge of media out there. So data sets and things and streaming videos. And so, yeah, I don't think we get enough credit for actually evolving along with the times,
That's true. I've seen a lot of improvements in the library system at CU, and some of it is around convenience and some of it's around scope. Right? Mm-hmm. So I regularly get books from 100 different libraries and they're delivered to my mailbox, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And useful because I'm not always able to pick them up and so on. Mm-hmm. All right, I want to get back to, we can talk more library stuff.
I know, forever I could.
I can gush. So you said that waiting tables brought out the best and worst in of their personalities?
I think amongst my coworkers, yeah. I mean, we were just frazzled and stressed out, but also so generous and caring with each other and looking out for each other. Mm. And so I was lucky in most of the places except for Denny's. People had my back for the most part. So if a patron was, acting badly, the manager was right out there like, you got to leave. And I don't know, that's a kind of responsibility and care for their workers that I really liked.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm about to start teaching. This will come out after my class is actually done, but I'm about to start teaching. So I've started reviewing my notes and so on. And one of the first readings that I give on day one is the customer's not always right. And we'll have a conversation about you have to take care of your employees, right? That they're important stakeholders. And so it sounds like your manager recognized that it's important to back a server over a customer when that customer's
very much. Yeah. And now I'm kind of a big boss in the library, which I never would have expected. And I guess it's just dawning on me right now.
To yourself
yeah, I prefer if my staff calls me big boss. But now I'm just realizing, I wonder if some of my boss behavior is modeled on some of my best managers. I mean, certainly some of my best supervisors in the library world I have taken a lot from, but yeah, that taking care of your staff certainly is number one. I mean, you can't deliver, good service to anybody else if, you're suffering. I mean, sort of the same with your person too, Got to take care of yourself before you can be a good mom.
You have to put your oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
Before.
It's up to a certain limit. You can definitely overdo that. and, wallow in, taking care of yourself and making your body like a pristine engine or something. Like, come on, that's a little too much.
I see. Yes. So what did you struggle with besides the knife welding person at 2 a.m. as a server?
Just pervasive entitlement and demanding what you want and what you need, above all else, like not seeing that this person actually, I worked as a server when, we got paid $2.13 an hour, and you did work for tips exclusively. I don't know if it's much different nowadays, but people who've never worked in that kind of industry before kind of being demanding and not understanding all the mechanics and behind everything, and that, your cook might be on morphine right now. And so like, what am I supposed to do about that? Eggs are going to take a little longer. So, yeah, I think that was the most challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it. I've done service jobs, but I've never worked as a server. And I do notice a tension sometimes between trying to understand that there's a whole supply chain happening behind the scenes of this person, and then expecting service that you're paying sometimes a lot of money for. And, I tip well. So, and I tend to tip well even if it's not good. And so, how do you navigate that situation that is respectful, but also saying like, hey, I actually right now, to the listeners, I have my hands out, palms up, like, hey, what's going on here?
Yeah. If you worked an hourly job, you wouldn't be tipped on how kind and sweet. You wouldn't be paid by how kind and sweet you are or whatever, So it's kind of an odd profession where that matters to your bottom line,
Yes.
Where it's like, well, that person was a little awkward. I'm not going to give him as much a tip. It's like, why would you be putting that in the equation of getting paid, I don't know.
I had a guy on recently who former stand-up, and he talked about doing food service, and he had his little bits that he would use at certain times, and his tactics that he had for getting better tips and things like that. So yeah, you're right. I agree. It's an unusual. It's a shallow part of the evaluation, right? Which really should be how good was the food and did it arrive on time and was my water filled and those kinds of things. So I want to get back to another statement. You said you'd probably be living elsewhere.
Oh,
Tell me more.
Let's see. There's many levels to that. I don't know. I've always wanted to live.
Elsewhere, you mean like another country?
Some sort of. I've always wanted to live abroad. So yes, I have fantasies about spending 6 months abroad, 6 months in the States. I have family here, so I don't want to be too far away.
Do you get a sabbatical as a librarian?
If I make tenure in 2020, I would get sabbatical.
All right.
So I have to turn everything in next year, and it's nerve-wracking.
I bet.
Yeah. But yeah, Denver's not my favorite, but I am making the best of it as much as I can. I am so proud of my life in how involved in the community I am. So I work 6 blocks away from our area campus. I just read poetry at Metro's Center for Visual Arts, which is in my neighborhood. I just opened a garage gallery that, for the most part, maybe the whole part, it's all been local artists in there that I've hosted.
This is Georgia.
Yeah, Georgia.
Your pop art space located in the alley behind 952 Mariposa Street.
That's correct.
In a garage.
In a garage.
And why is it called Georgia?
Georgia is my daughter's name.
Okay.
So I named it after her.
And your aim is to bring artists, musicians, writers, this is a word that I liked, fabricators and thinkers together for a short period of time.
Not too long.
Not too long. I got to get to bed.
Yeah, I have kicked people out too.
I like to say pool hours.
Pool hours?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
we have to adhere to pool hours. 10 o'clock.
Yeah,
you gotta
10,
go.
right. Yeah. Well, that's also where the noise ordinance kicks in Denver too. So
I see.
yeah. And a couple shows ago, we got yelled at by the neighbors.
Okay.
But I appreciate getting yelled at.
Then
Yes, the cops, that's a little too much. So
Sure.
yeah.
You don't want the cops coming and disturbing your fabricators. What is a fabricator?
I don't know. I mean, people do all sorts of crazy stuff these days. So, I mean, I guess it's more making installations, maybe making wearable art pieces, things like that.
So a sculptor might be a fabricator or a...
Yeah.
I see. Okay. How long has that been going? And why have I not received invite?
It's
Do
probably going
qualify
straight to your spam
things?
folder.
So to the listeners, when I greeted Sommer at the curb, she said, "It's nice to meet you." And I was like, we've met before.
There's a lot going on in my brain. I can't remember every tall person.
So, you're actually one of the first people I wrote down when I started this podcast that I wanted to talk to you. So I'm glad we're
2 years later. You finally
number 30, whatever you are, 9 or something like that. And part of the reason is exactly for how involved you are. And one is you're a funny person. Like I love, as I said earlier, your tweets, though they have changed over the years.
That's interesting.
Well, you have your pin tweet says, "I did come here to make friends," which I like. I like the play on words. Yet sometimes it doesn't appear that you're here to make friends.
Well, if you want a little wimpy friend, maybe you need to go elsewhere.
I don't want wimpy friends. That's no. I like. So I also like that your involvement in the community. Like it's very clear that you're not only participating but facilitating. So how did Georgia come about? The garage, not the child.
Well, mommy and daddy love each other very much. Yes, the garage. I've been writing poetry for a long time, and I kind of was outside myself, watching myself, and I'm just gravitating more and more towards visual art and falling in love with it and reading more about it. And I do live right near the Santa Fe Arts District. And I had this little dream of like, I want to maybe rent a space and have a gallery and have pop-up shows. And my friend Noel was like, "You have a garage, just do it in there." I was like, huh? Oh, that's cool. So, I started working on that, and about 6 or 7 months later, I had my first show. And I only do it when it's warm out, so maybe 5 shows a year or something. And it's only been running for a year, so I might just quit. I don't know. I like how it's my thing, and I can stop if I want, and I can do whatever I want in there, and I'm not beholden to any kind of board or any stakeholders really, besides the folks that I invite in there and host and support.
A few neighbors.
And the few neighbors,
few
yeah,
neighbors.
Of course, yeah.
I feel the same way about this podcast. It's one of the few things that is truly mine in terms of creative endeavors. Like there's no gatekeepers. There's no. I mean, my guests are clearly important.
Oh, well, thanks.
But yeah, it's the same kind of feeling that a little more transportable, and I can do it when it snows. But yeah, I think that's great. Now, your drawing, the fact that you're doing comics is new to me. I didn't know that. I always think of you as a poet and a joke teller. I don't think of you as a joke teller. Is that weird? Like more than a comic?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. No, that's preferable. I am not a comic. I think that's like high stakes stuff, and I don't even want to attempt that.
What?
I have before. It's very hard work. It takes a lot of dedication, and I don't do that, and I don't have that. Yeah, those people are, their passion and hard work is far outdoes mine. So
yeah, it's a grind. I think being a comic can be a bit of a grind.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I did it a couple times in New York City, and when you're a nobody, you're out. You have to go on every night, sometimes twice a night at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday.
No pool hours.
No pool hours.
Yes.
You have to beg people to come to your shows, and then your buddies have to have a 2-drink minimum, and it's too much.
So it's no surprise that you just started your own space.
I haven't had comedy in there yet, but I hope I can.
No, but but in principle, the principle being like, now I don't have to beg for space. I don't have to pay for it. I get to do it on my own.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we have met before I went to a poetry reading that you were running a while ago.
Easy.
Look, no, it's I mean, I was just in the audience, so it's not like, So when you came into the office, you actually commented on it's a print I have.
Yeah, that you drew?
No, hardly. Mm-hmm. I bought it from some Etsy-like site. But I liked it because it's, and I could take a picture of it and put it up as the exhibits in this. I liked it because it was visually interesting, and then it also depicts travel both by air and sea, which I've done, not actually piloting myself, but being a passenger. Mm-hmm. So I always just liked it. But then you immediately commented on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the boat is above the airplane, which is great.
I've never thought of that.
So maybe you're hanging it upside down, actually.
No, I'm certain that's because otherwise the boat would be upside down, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But yes. Yeah, it's fun. So how did this happen?
The comics?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know. I really remember vividly maybe when I was 7 drawing a dinosaur, and I was like, damn, that dinosaur looks pretty good. And then so I just always
But no offense, but isn't that what every 7-year-old thinks of their dinosaur?
I hope so.
Right?
I hope
that's
so.
Like the classic thing is like you ask a group of 7-year-olds, who here is artists? And all the hands go up. And who here can dance? And all the hands go up.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sad that we lose that.
Some of us lose that.
Yeah.
You have not.
No, I'm not great at anything. So I just always kind of doodled a little bit. And then I worked for the Free Weekly in Richmond, Virginia. That was called Punchline. It's gone away now, as so many great free weeklies have. And I sent them some comics. I tried to draw a couple covers for them. And I mean, when I say I worked for them, I delivered papers around town in my Toyota Echo. Then it took me like 9-10 hours to do that every week.
Okay.
I guess then I tried to write a couple reviews too. But that's when I started kind of doing the comics like in a strip form. They're like more like gag comics, so they're not serials really, with no superheroes or anything hard to draw. Nothing at all.
Like you draw like boobs and telephones.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yes. Basically, exclusively. No, I have the male version of that, which is
I haven't seen that one.
Penises and traffic cones.
Of course.
Yeah.
Which came first?
The boobs.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. More familiar with those.
Well, yeah, so thank you for being egalitarian about private parts. Okay, so you're 7 and you're like, I've got something here.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I don't know any. The only thought I remember is like, that's a pretty good dinosaur.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, I don't think I reflected beyond that.
And was this reflected by the adults in your world? Like, did you have teachers or parents who encouraged that part of your...
No, okay. I mean, no. That's why if you look at my drawings, they're really bad. But I think maybe the funny part, I was encouraged. So I grew up in a family that we quoted Mel Brooks movies all the time. We quoted Ghostbusters, Airplane, all that stuff. And anytime I made my family laugh, they laughed so hard and that felt so good. And I'd say that's probably why I like funny things and try to make people laugh.
Yeah, I think that's a common narrative, is that it's either encouraged or it's used, like some people use it to help manage their relationships? Were your parents funny, or they just laugh easily?
They are both funny.
They are?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Neat. Neat. And siblings?
Yes, Casey is very funny. And I have 2 half siblings who are also very funny.
Wow.
Yeah. Maybe Casey's the funniest, though, my sister. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm. When she doesn't listen to this, she'll be...
Yeah, she's not going to listen to this.
So you said 6 months in the U.S., 6 months elsewhere. Denver's not exactly your cup of tea.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is it because it's not as culturally developed as some other places?
It has like a lot of identity issues, I feel like. And the identities that maybe override the ones I value are like Broncos and sports and getting out of Denver, like going to the mountains. So, you know, I don't know. If you've been on Tinder at all, you know, the people in Denver, all the pictures are just people doing yoga on red rocks or holding a big fish while they're mountain biking, you know. I mean, it is overwhelmingly that. And so...
I just sometimes wonder how much of that it ends up being a projection. Like the trails aren't that busy and the rivers aren't that busy that every single person every single weekend is doing all that stuff.
Yeah,
but it does seem
true.
to be, there is a lot of that find my partner in crime to go ride over mountains.
Oh my God, you have been on Tinder? That's exactly what everyone says.
I assume that's an automatic swipe left.
Well, you know, that is probably the case that they are just projecting that. But I guess the problem is projecting that.
I mean, at the very least, it's aspirational. You know, it's certainly coming from an interest.
Mm-hmm.
That's there. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think that's fair. I've been here a long time now, 14 years plus, and it's interesting. I grew up in New Jersey and did a bunch of my education there. And I always felt too outdoorsy for New Jersey. And then I moved here and I always felt too urban, you know, for Boulder. Mm-hmm. And so I understand that tension. Mm-hmm. And thus to seek out those. I mean, you know, I think Denver's come a long way. I think, you know, the museums are on the upswing and better exhibits.
Mm-hmm.
And,
I would agree with that.
And, you know, and the transplants from places that value culture more. So I think it's like, it's happening, but it's slow. But it's not like a great international city. It's not Paris, London, New York, Tokyo, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So I understand. Well, I hope you get tenure, and I hope you get to do a sabbatical.
Thank you very much.
I have a lot to ask you about, and we're, as it tends to be the case, is going to run short. So you tweeted, just sent the all caps, the worst poems I've ever written to a famous contest. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What happened?
I have since been rejected from that. Yeah, didn't win.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why send the worst?
Oh, it was an accident. I had just written my worst, and I saw that poetry ad, and I was in that weird, you know, post poetry writing stage where you kind of think you are good.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah, what the hell? I'll just send these new poems that I just shat out to this famous contest.
What makes a bad poem? Or, excuse me, worst?
What makes a worst poem? Oh, God, that's such a hard question. You know, I think when I was thinking about it, I was probably comparing that to other poems I've written. I guess ones that just don't have any compelling emotion or feeling, or aren't saying something new or important or looking at something in a different, better way.
Okay.
You know, some derivative probably would be a quality of a bad poem. You know, it might be a quality of anything bad, where it's not kind of honoring the inspiration, but it's like watering it down or something.
All right. So bad poems are not novel, don't talk about important things, and are and lack emotion.
Yeah, and a lot of probably other things.
And a
Because,
lot
I
of
mean, the first thing I thought of was like, oh, well, I could write a poem that did that, all that bad stuff, and it was good. So I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah. It's hard to say, too, because so subjective. And
I think it's interesting, a poetry contest.
yeah,
Like
right?
the idea that you would have a contest to judge the best poem seems
I know.
weird to me.
Yeah, it's a question that shouldn't even be asked. You know, it's like not what makes good art, what makes bad art. It's like that's not even the correct question to bring to it. It just should be like, what is this doing?
I feel that way a little bit like a recipe contest. You know, at least that works a little bit. But still, you're just like, well, there are lots of,
right.
good ways to make things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of people like different things, right?
Yeah.
Cilantro tastes like soap to people. And so...
And yet I find it delicious.
It is delicious.
So what are you working on right now?
Right now, I am... This literary magazine called Jacket 2 asks me to write kind of blog posts for the next 3 months. So I'm writing about humor and humor in poetry. So I hope to write about 12 of those until the end of the year. The last show at Georgia's going to be this weekend. So I'm like, oh, shit, what am I going to do? Not every second of my time is taken up. So I was like, I'll start a band. So maybe I'll have a winter band with some girls.
Do you already have a name for the band?
My friend Juliet Lee and I were talking about it would be called Wet Wonder or Nude Nuisance or something like that.
Okay.
2 practices, 1 show, the end. Very quick, temporary band. There should be more.
Pop-up band.
Yeah, pop-up band.
Are you fronting this band?
She said that she wouldn't do it unless I did front it because she doesn't want to front it, so I might have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you tell me how you find? I actually have a question about this. Like, do you have a writing or thinking practice? Like, how is it? I mean, you're a mom. You're the big boss at the library.
One of the big bosses.
Okay, one of the big bosses. And yet you're really prolific. Like you're drawing, you're writing poems, you're making those great cracks on the Twitter, etc. Do you have a system? How do you do this?
How do I do it?
Good
I know. I don't.
Fast?
I mean, I don't waste a lot of time.
Yeah, you said earlier, I don't have time to listen to podcasts.
Yeah, I don't know when I would do that. I don't know.
I don't either.
Oh my God, you should never admit that.
I think if you're in the mode of creating content, it's, like you should be focused on the creation and the consuming should get pushed aside a little bit.
I could see that you might not want to hear what other people are doing too, and then kind of fill in gaps where you think there are some, or compare yourself or something.
That's an interesting idea. The worry, of course, is what's called cryptomnesia, is where you steal other people's ideas without knowing you're stealing them.
It happens all the time.
You hear them, forget that you heard it, it pops up to you, and so on. As a scholar, I'm super aware of that. I'm also actually writing a paper about a set of related bad behaviors that academics have. So I'm pretty good about documenting stuff. I'm good at least writing it down, and knowing that it's there or in whatever form it's at. I certainly know that as a podcast interviewer, I have a lot to improve. I'm sure that's obvious to you right now.
I've been taking notes, so I'll give them to you at the end.
I can't wait to see the tweet storm after this. But sometimes I've never thought about interviewing as a skill. And so it's been fun to try to develop this one. And so sometimes I listen to learn how to listen and ask and so on. So, but I agree with you. I keep a full day, and so podcast is not. Can I tell you something? I'm doing this feels strange, but I'm liking right now.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'll tell you anyways. I guess the way I phrase that, it sounds bad.
Terrifying.
It's not bad.
Yeah. Okay.
I've stopped listening to music in my car when I drive.
Yeah, so you can think.
Yeah, I've never done that before. I've always kind of filled up that space. I was like, I love music, filled up that space. And so I'm starting to, I didn't even notice I was doing it. Like I had kind of turned the radio off, and then I was getting in the car and just going and not turning it on. And it's been interesting thing to do. Like it's very rare to have, at least in that space, not something buying. For
that is very much where I think of a lot of my jokes.
When you're driving?
Even on the way up here, I thought of a joke. So,
which was this?
And this is the kind of joke that I am sure someone has thought of before. That's exactly the way. I mean, and I didn't hear it before, but it's just the way. It's a very simple, easy joke. So probably 1,000 people have thought of it before. Oh God, really? Okay.
I'm making a face. Like, are you going to tell it?
It's how many drunks does it take to screw in a light bulb?
How many?
I'm not drunk. You're drunk. Something like that. I have to work on my drunk voice, but yes. I'm sure that in myriad variations has been told before. I
have my current favorite joke to tell people is a light bulb joke. I'm afraid I've told it on the podcast before, but I'll do it anyways.
What is it?
I think you'll appreciate this one quite a lot. How many hipsters does it take to screw in a light bulb?
How many?
It's an obscure number. You probably wouldn't know it.
I think I have heard that one.
I'm sure. I did not create that joke. Yeah. I'm retelling that one.
It's great. I love those classic setups. I really do. They are not exhausted yet, In
the same way that their band names aren't exhausted. I was thinking recently, when are we going to run out of band names?
I have thought that many times. I think I had a tweet about it, like, in 2080, there's going to be a band named Salad because that's the last possible name.
Oh, that's funny.
Something like that.
That seems like an Onion kind of style joke.
Does it?
A little bit. Like a headline,
like scientists have found out that.
Right. We're down to 8 band names left or something like that.
Yeah, that would be a funny article.
So, okay, so you're working on a band.
Well, not really. That's just in the back of my mind.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But, I don't know. Might happen.
And your creative endeavors are done. You're compelled to do them. Is there an end game? Is it just process based? What's the?
I don't know. I mean, I have, I go to therapy and talk about this. Like, what happens if I stop creating and stop doing things? Who would I be? And there's some fear and some anxiety about that I wouldn't be. I couldn't see myself reflected in things around me. My mom was like, "Why can't you just be a mom and a librarian?" And
that seems like a terrible advice.
That's the very minimal of what she said to me. But I don't know why I can't. I can't, though. That's not enough. That is definitely not enough. This world needs 1,000 things, that needs help in a million ways. And I can't just do those things. I don't know why.
So I've sort of developed I can't answer that question, of course, although I can cite some research that suggests part of the reason why.
Why
people like you. Why you people.
Yeah.
You creative types. I like to say we creative types now. I had rather late in my life, I think in my 40s probably, I started to embrace this description of I'm a creative person. The world doesn't bestow that label on you easily, and certainly doesn't. As we talked about how children lose it, but identity matters. Thinking of yourself as a good mom, you know what I mean, as someone who provides. I'm not a librarian. I provide the world. Knowledge, right? These kinds of things, like having purpose, I think is important for, just making our way in life, just understanding why we do what we do. And when life gets hard, why we made those choices. I'm sure there are times where you're stressed, you're past your edge.
Yeah, many times.
And, But, one of the things that I think is interesting for non-creative people, for people who don't draw or write or even, think of jokes in the car, what they don't realize is that as you get more skilled at that, the process has an element of enjoyment. Enjoyment's not the right word. Pleasure is not the right word. But there's this pleasantness, this feeling of satisfaction, these moments of that happen, almost like when you drink a beer on a hot day and you're like, that feeling that becomes rewarding, that it's not just the, publishing, you're on my period. Because oftentimes when the publication comes out, that feels nice.
Yeah, for maybe a minute.
Yeah, but it's not joyous. It's not. No. It's not joyous in the way. But all the process going up to it has those elements. It's often referred to as flow, this flow state.
Mm-hmm. So what, cortisol is released or something when you feel that, and you just get trained like a rat?
Well, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you the physiology of it. That's outside my expertise. But certainly we know that biologically, we are drawn towards pleasurable experiences, whether it's purely pleasurable, sugar, sleep, sex, things, associated with survival and beyond, but then also intellectual, the sort of pursuit of insight, I think is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then so much of it, though, is not pleasant. So much of it is doubting yourself and no rewards, like losing contests, not getting things published, not finding an agent, having jokes fail. So much is unpleasant.
There must be
the
something.
Risk. It's something about that risk factor, too, that you have to put everything on the line. And to get even just a molecule of, validation or something.
It's
a weird, it's a weird equation.
I agree. So to me, there's these other components of it, right? So now you're venturing into the world of achievement. So, there's, as an artist, artists can pursue one or both of these things. Well, I think a good artist always pursues engagement. That has to be essential to the process. I just think it's, as you were saying, it's so difficult. The failures are much more frequent than successful. Most jokes aren't any good. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing most poems, at least at the beginning, aren't very good.
Yeah, well, I mean, also most poetry nobody reads that. So that's another strange endeavor to
be writing poetry knowing that there's very little audience.
And if you sell 500 copies, that's top of the world.
Yeah, that's a big, I can see that as a big win. So that engagement has to be there, or I don't think you can get good enough to be able to create great art. Then the next level is this idea of achievement. Are you, to what degree is that external validation, whether it be getting an agent or selling books or winning a poetry contest.
I think you're missing the entire metaphysical realm too.
Tell me more.
Where you working with language and expanding language probably has this ripple effect across consciousness and culture and definitely boundaries of nation and whatever.
Oh, that's interesting.
So that in your practice, while you might be creating new ways that make people emote or feel or understand the world. And so tapping into that, there's plenty of poets who don't publish anything and just, that's a private practice. And well, I mean, that seems ancillary to what we're talking about, but there's something inside, especially writing in a marginalized or practicing something in such a marginalized art. There has to be that going on too, or else you're not going to sustain that.
I mean, it is an interesting idea about, I want to return to this idea of metaphysical and expanding language, because I want you to help me understand it more. there's a common thread that happens in art, even people who are making commercially viable products, about doing it for themselves. This notion of an audience of one that I think's interesting. So you were talking about the poet who never publishes anything, just does it for him or herself. Mm-hmm. There are people who make the argument that actually that process is it's not guaranteed to create something that another group of people will really like, but it's certainly going to lead to something that might be fresh, novel, different, right? Because if you're writing something for your own unique perspective, it's likely to be fresh and different for others, instead of trying to create a poem that other people will like. If you create a poem that you like. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yes. If you create a poem other people will like, you're going to fail.
And that's your goal.
I just think it's not going to be the best poem that you could make.
Yeah, I see. Mm-hmm. So
I guess there's like that process question and the change and growth that happens in the engagement of something creative or really anything. So that kind of mindfulness of what you're doing in the moment and that's sort of incorporated into the creative life too, and probably doesn't get as much airtime, because we're not really that kind of society right now.
I know it's terrible. Like back to your point about sports, I spent a lot of my life doing sports, and admittedly, like, I love working out. I know that sounds crazy to a lot of people, but I just really like it. But I feel like a late bloomer when it comes to like a creative life. And yet I feel like that's just as important as the physical side of life, especially as I get older, in terms of beyond work, thinking about retirement and wanting to have a creative practice. Like I know that if I won the lottery, I would still write now. Mm-hmm. I mean, it took me 20 years to get there, but I would still write even though it's not being rewarded with a paycheck. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I feel fortunate I'm getting actually a little emotional. I feel fortunate that I was able to discover that. I mean, I discovered it because of work, but now it's blossomed into this, it's turned into such a great tool for not only creating things, but also for creating a mindset, a feeling. Mm-hmm. Hence, yeah. I understand why you feel compelled to do it, because the feeling it creates, the connection to purpose, and even if it doesn't lead to achievable,
Yeah.
Although, I can tell you're hustling at the very least. You're publishing stuff and...
Yeah. Right.
You're you're creating your channels and...
Yeah, I am. Yeah. I don't quite know why. Like, why can't I be that quiet, hermetic monk? But, I don't want to either, but it is kind of a question that's good to ask yourself. Yeah. Keep yourself in check and your ego in check. And
well, it's cheaper to ask it here in your therapy sessions.
How much are you charging again?
Free. This is so free. So this raises the question of, what are you saying no to?
Yeah, part of my guiding life principles are to say no as few times as possible. So mostly I say no to the things that I said yes to and I forgot to do. That's a lot of things.
That's a nice tweet.
Uh-huh. Yeah, what a good question. What do you say no to? Gosh. I don't know. I know 6 or 8 months ago, I was complaining that I didn't have any projects and what was I doing with my life. And now I am just drowning. Yeah. So, you know what? I said no to something recently. This person approached me to do a project with them. And that person was just took up all the air in the room and really, I thought that they would be asking me a lot of questions and listening to me to see if they wanted to collaborate with me. But it was sort of like they invited me to interview themselves. And I said no to that. And I kind of got a little nervous and shaky to say that to this person. And I'm so glad I did. I think I dodged a bullet there. But yeah, I was just kind of proud that I had that wherewithal to say, you know what, this is going to be a dead end project where I do a lot of work for nothing. So I was glad I looked out for myself. But
who was that? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I mean, nobody would probably even know. But
so, what do you want to talk about? Did you have anything?
What do I want to talk?
Yeah.
You mean about myself?
On anything. I know you brought some books. You brought a couple of your books.
Yes, I did.
I like that you brought your book of comics.
Very easy to describe, though.
Do you want me to do it, or
yeah,
would you like
do.
to do
You
it?
go ahead and do it.
So the book is called The Circle Book, and it's white with black font, and there's a circle, hand-drawn circle on the cover, and then there are hand-drawn circles on every page. They're different, though.
Yeah.
So each one is unique.
Mm-hmm.
And then beneath them is a descriptor.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to flip randomly through and say, so
okay,
this
be careful.
one,
Not safe for
there's
work.
also no page numbers or chapter headings.
No.
So this one says urethra, which is a circle. It's good. Platelet. Exclamation.
Oh.
Oh, nice. Man, that one makes you think. Pogo stick footprint. That's well played. Ping pong balls on the next page. I like this one. I actually saw this one online. It says everything and then / nothing. So view of blizzard through telescope. That's good. So what's the story behind this book? It's fun.
That started out as a comic, like a big, on maybe an 8.5 by 11, and I just nipple. Mm-hmm.
Slate. Are these in order?
They're
or did
not.
you put them in order?
No, they're not. Though I was sitting with my friend, and he was going through it the other day, and he noticed an order, which I think is just.
I'm sorry to interrupt. As a fallen Catholic, I really enjoy Body of Christ. That's a little inside.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So you're with your friend.
And he was reading it from front to back, which was, I'd never seen anyone do that. And he noticed, he ascribed some kind of narrative to it. And he's like, well, this is the part where you really shine through. And I loved that. I loved that he thought that. Mm-hmm.
There's one that is not a smooth circle. And it's exit wound. Mm-hmm. Do you have an entry wound
yes.
one? On the previous page, entry wound. Okay. Well done. Of course you do.
I think that's a good metaphor for something that I try to make poetry do too, would be to like see something from all the angles, I don't know if that's a cubist kind of idea too or something, but like, yeah, taking that, it's a shape, it's also a letter, it's also a sound, it's also, anything. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it was like an exercise for me where you could go all the way from nothing and everything to a silly, pogo stick footprint. So, yeah, I don't know. I like way to destroy a funny book, Sommer. But by over explaining, but yeah.
And what's the? So this is in a book. So how did you get this?
Man, I can't believe. So Kyle Schlesinger runs Cuneiform Books, which is in Austin, out of Austin. Maybe he moved recently. But they do artist books, and they do poetry books, and they reissue some books. And so I sent it to him, and he's like, I love it.
Let's do it.
Yeah. I was like, what? Wait a second. Did you read this?
Did you flip through the whole thing?
Yeah.
It's great. It's fun.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's a fun book.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I want you to keep doing what you're doing. I think the world needs more people like you.
Well, that's so nice. Thank you.
I do believe that. We were making jokes about me working in a business school on the way up here. Mostly I was making
hilarious
jokes and you were silently judging. But I actually do believe that business can provides value. It's just sometimes hard to see among some of the less valuable things that are done. But the nice thing about art is I think it purely does that. It has many fewer of the downsides. And so I think what you do is, I think it's super interesting. It's actually, like, for me, really motivating. It's fun to see what you see, listen, hear, what you do with language. I'm lucky to, when you interview funny people, what you end up really doing is interviewing a lot of really smart people. They just go hand in hand. It's just, there are plenty of smart people who aren't funny, but there's very few funny people who aren't smart. And so it's kind of a nice way to trick a bunch of really smart people to talk to me, which is nice, and different.
I like, too, that it's smart in the broadest way. It's not book smart people, not always. It's not academic people. It's not street smart people. It's not, it actually creates a good lens to understand what smartness means, too.
I think that's right.
Like emotionally smart, all sorts of smart. So, yeah.
I think that's definitely the case. Just because you can do well on a standardized test, again,
doesn't mean anything.
It's funny predicts smart. Funny predicts smart better than smart predicts funny, if that makes sense.
I think it does.
Conditioning on knowing someone's funny, they're very likely to be smart. Knowing someone's smart, chances are better that they're funny, but I'm now getting into conditional probabilities.
Smart is hard to say,
No, but what I'm saying,
because when you call someone smart, it's such a narrow definition when in fact it shouldn't be that narrow. And I think if you call someone funny, it opens that possibility of that they are smart in this kind of worldly big way. I don't know. It's like a more generous definition or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I regularly have people who can use language well, and you clearly can do that. And I think it's part of the reason I like you on Twitter, because it's a very language-based, at least as it was originally conceived, was very word-based.
Yeah. Oh my God. It was conceived for poets, 100%.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. The economy of language, the brevity, how punctuation means everything, It's like when people are, poetry's dead, whatever. I'm like, what are you talking about? If you have that skill, this is the new, a whole huge technology was built for you. So
yeah, to find a following, to find inspiration, or to be the lone
exercise
poet
of it too.
Who, instead of just writing it in a notebook, can write it into the world, and what happens.
Yeah. Well, and also just the skills of the poet are exactly valuable for that medium.
Oh, that's very nice. So I want to ask you one last question.
Okay.
It's an easy one. No one struggles with this question.
Okay. The stakes are high.
What are you reading, watching, or listening to? This is weird because we just talked about how you don't consume that much.
No, you don't consume that much. I don't listen to podcasts.
But you consume other things. So what are you reading, watching, or listening to that's really good? That's like, head and shoulders above.
I am reading right now Nathaniel Mackey's book, Base Cathedral. He's a poet, and this is a novel, kind of an epistolary novel, so told in letters. And it's...
Wait, what is that? I don't understand.
It's just letters. It's a novel, but
in letters.
In letters.
Okay. Like letters that you send back and forth.
He actually uses letters to create words, which create sentences. It's amazing.
What?
Just kidding.
Okay, good.
I mean, not kidding. That is what is happening, too. But yeah, it's two blank. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's a great book. And because he's a poet, great sentences filled with jazz, which I love. And so every letter I read, I'm like, who's that person? I got to go research them. So it's wonderful and
That's
inspiring and kind of expansive in that way. So I get to learn about music at the same time. I can't stop watching Rick and Morty.
Okay.
I cannot stop watching it. I couldn't stop watching Veep years ago, and it's the same level of. I think it's just because it's so packed with thoughts and jokes, and I don't know. It is a funny show. What else? I don't know. I just saw the Tara Donovan exhibit at the MCA.
I went to that.
I really loved it, and
I
I need to bring Georgia, and I need to go a couple more times. But I couldn't even take a picture of it. It's just you can't.
It's big.
It's big and it's intricate, and it's the more you stand in front of those pieces, the more thoughts you have. It's really arresting.
Yeah, I went on opening night, and it was a little zoo-ish.
Oh yeah.
It was fun. It was an event, which, as we were saying earlier, Denver doesn't do very well in that regard. But it was fun to get dressed up and go and see people out celebrating artwork. And so for listeners, the MCA, the Museum of Contemporary Art, is a small museum in downtown Denver, and the entire building is dedicated to this New York-based artist, Tara Donovan. And it's big, and I think it's audacious, and it's a fun exhibit on top of it all. It's a little cheeky. I liked it a lot. And but I look forward to going back when it's quiet on a Thursday afternoon when no one, a few people are there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. That's a nice
different.
one. I'm glad you mentioned that. Sommer, thank you so much for driving up and spending time in the business school.
You're welcome. I won't be back.
To talk to me. I really feel inspired, and I do thank you for sticking with Denver and helping try to make it a better place.
Thank you. Thanks for asking me to be on this.
Great.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to visit petermcgraw.org for more information about our guest, show notes, and social media links. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with others. Join Dr. Peter McGraw next week